We good to go? All right. Good evening.
All right. Hello, folks. Good to see you all.
Welcome from the studios.
Of Black and White Theology.
Yeah, Black and White Theology. Out of the basement and into the studios. From our humble beginnings on episode 1, we bring to you episode number 10.
Is it 10?
Yeah.
See, this is where, if you would have listened to me and got some mugs, we could have given something away on our 10th episode, because that seems pretty significant.
It's like a giveaway.
Because it's our 10th episode.
It's like a gimmick to get people to listen to our podcast.
No, it's like a 10th episode.
Like a celebration.
A celebration, yeah.
I think the 10th episode celebration is like cake or something. You bring out the mugs.
Where's the cake? John got some yellow rice back there. He's eating while
corn.
he's playing with the knobs, so maybe he could share his rice.
Yeah, it's Dr. Pepper.
Maybe we'll see if we make 100 episodes, then we'll give something away.
Yeah.
Because then you're legit.
Yeah.
Anybody can do 10.
Exactly.
My 10-year-old can do 10 episodes.
Yeah, that's nothing.
All right, so no problem then. All right, we'll order the mugs later. We're good.
I'm going to get you a mug.
I appreciate
You keep bringing up these mugs. So.
I want a mug. You see the episodes and they have their mugs?
Oh, I know. It's legit. I know.
You
That's
got a
what makes
laptop
it
and a
legit.
cell
Yeah.
phone. It's like, come on, man.
Well,
I wonder what's in those mugs. Anyway, that's another conversation. Does the Bible condone drinking? All right.
we'll not be discussing drinking today.
No.
But maybe in the future we'll let Ron tackle that one when I'm on vacation or something like that.
Okay, all right. Just leave your mug. I'll fill them both up.
So, I'm Doug. This is Ron. He is Black. I am White, and we discuss theology.
Black and White Theology.
That's right.
Right. All right.
So, Pastor Ron is the pastor of Allentown Fellowship Church. How is Allentown Fellowship Church going these days?
We are going. We're meeting, and I was talking to Monique, and I said I can't wait till we get into as far as living in the community. We have to move up there. Yeah. So we're making plans to downsize and get rid of stuff, and hopefully this spring is the target date, January, for us to look to relocate. So, but no, we're still meeting and still doing our services, YouTube and Facebook, and just trying to get the word out that hey, we're there, guys. If you're looking for a Bible believing church, we're there. But it's going to make such a big difference when we eat where the people eat, do laundry where they do their laundry. Yeah. Even though we have a washer and dryer, I'm going to be going to the local laundromat because that's where you go, and going to the local barbershop. And just, hey guys, we got to get into the community, but we're excited, and just Yeah,
I think especially when you're planning a church, being and living in that community is so massively important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
It's one thing to pop in from the suburbs and
right,
pop back down.
Right. Yep.
But it's really difficult to build meaningful relationships that are necessary for establishing a church that you plan on being an impact in that community for a lot of years to come. So
absolutely. Yep.
All right, we'll keep praying for Ron and Allentown Fellowship Church as they continue to move forward with that church plant in that neighborhood. We're going to keep on with our discussion that we started a couple of weeks ago, and we started with the question, is apologetics necessary for evangelism? And the answer to that was really found in our discussion that we had about the place of apologetics in the Christian life.
Yep.
And the importance of it. The power is in the Word, right? You need the Word. The gospel is the power of God unto salvation. Yet apologetics gives you a foundation that you can stand on. It gives you a reason for the hope that lies within you. It gives you a confidence to know what you believe and why you believe it. And so having a firm grasp and an understanding of apologetics is really important, especially in the culture that we live in, where Christianity and your belief system is either going to be attacked as ridiculous and stupid, right?
Yep.
Apostle Paul says that this is a stumbling block to the Jews. It's foolishness to the Gentiles. People look at that and say, you mean to tell me your God was born of a virgin and he lived this life and then he died, was buried, he rose again, and then he ascended up into heaven, and then he's coming back on a white horse?
Sounds like a fairy tale.
It's like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's what it says.
It's like, okay, well, good for you. You know, crazy, right?
Yep.
And there's so much that is crazy about it, right? It is
from a human perspective.
Yeah, it is unbelievable.
And if you believe that there's no God.
Yeah. Right, so we're going to get into that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So you mean to tell me you believe that all of this was an accident? Now, all of a sudden, you're talking about something that's at least equally absurd,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and requires a tremendous amount of faith.
Yeah.
That we
No.
You know,
Science, Ron.
right,
It's based in science. Yours is based in fairy tales and legends.
right.
Right? And so we're going to talk about, does God exist?
Yeah.
And how do we know he exists? And what are the arguments that exist that point to a creator God? And because that is the perspective. You believe in fairy tales and legend written by dead, guys who didn't really have any firm grasp of science, right?
Right.
These are ancient, primitive writers from eons ago that really didn't understand science the way that we understand science today. And so you'll run into guys like, for instance, Lawrence Krauss, really one of the leading theoretical physicists, in our day.
Yeah.
But comes out with a book entitled
Something Out of Nothing.
The Universe Out of Nothing, right?
Yeah.
And how through all of his research and study, he can tell you how the universe came to be from nothing. Which, at the end of the day, if you look at what he's really saying, even I do, because I do agree with him. The universe did come from nothing. We call it in the Latin ex nihilo.
Right, out of
God
nothing,
breathed
God spoke everything into existence.
He's technically
So I
he's
agree.
right,
Right.
And so according to his theory, he's not wrong.
Right.
But you always have to, because kids will look at that book in college and be like, "Oh, evolution is true." It's
Right.
like, no, the universe did come out of nothing.
We agree.
But what came before that?
Right.
Like there has to be a first.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So for instance, you take gravity. Gravity is something that you can't see, right? But it's a law, right? You take Newton's laws of thermodynamics and things like that. These different laws that they're not material things that you can see or touch, but if you drop something, it falls. Okay. Where did the law of gravity come from?
Right.
Right? Who's to say that when I drop something, it doesn't fall, it rises, or it floats? So even the laws of physics themselves came from somewhere.
They were not always in existence.
Right. Laws of physics and mathematics. Yep. Like where does that come from? Right? So you have to go. You keep going back, and there has to be a starting point with someone. This is why we start with this vantage point of creative design. Okay, you can start there and be like, okay, creative design, whether that was a god or not. There's debate there, with people that are willing to be open. But you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so our presupposition is that God is eternal. What does it mean that God's eternal?
No beginning, no end.
Okay.
Not created. Sometimes I hear people say, well, you Christians believe God created everything, and you say that you cannot observe anything that does not have a creator, this laptop, these microphones, right? So then they say, well, then who created God?
Yeah.
And the premise is totally off. We don't say that all things were created. We said anything that came into being was created. God was always. So there's no creator needed.
So I think it's easy to comprehend in our finite minds a God that is eternal in the sense that he has no end.
Right.
It's very difficult for us to comprehend in our minds a God is eternal that has no beginning.
Absolutely.
Which tells me this, that God exists outside of our understanding of time and space.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so if we want to talk, theoretical physics, there's a God who created physics, but kind of even exists outside
of that. Right. And even go back to what you were saying, man, as far as the first cause. This is the way I explain it to the students at the high school, right? If you say that something came into existence, the universe, right? You always have to ask that question, well, then what brought that into existence? What brought that into existence, right? And to your point, you're going to have an infinite regressing backwards.
Until you reach
what?
Yeah.
Like there has to be something that was there all the time. That just makes logical sense. You can't just keep infinitely going back and say, well, who made that? Well, who made that? Well, right? That doesn't make logical sense. It had to start somewhere. And it's funny that when you say that there's a supreme being, creator, God, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that's just faith. Well, no, that's logic. That makes sense that there has to be someone, something, some entity, some power. You know, they used to say that, well, the universe was eternal. And then they kind of changed and said, no, we do believe the universe had a beginning because of the loss of energy, and it is actually dying down. Okay, so there you go. Even science kind of says that, yeah, even this all had a beginning. So then there has to be something there to put the whole thing in play.
Yep. Yeah, and even those that would argue for the eternality of the universe, based on what?
Right.
Now, they had to, like you said, retract that because the universe can't be eternal based on
all the laws of physics and
right?
the stuff that they're seeing happening. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have in apologetics what we call the cosmological argument.
Yeah.
Okay, you're here. Right.
There's a piece of evidence right
there.
Yeah,
like
why is there something rather than nothing?
Yes.
Right?
And so your answer is either the universe out of nothing.
Yep.
Okay. But even that is mandated upon something that started the universe, right? Whether it was just laws of physics, right? So they use the laws of physics to try to argue for the universe out of nothing, but where do the laws of physics come from?
Right. You're just taking the argument to a different point, right? Because the minute you say something like that, you're either conceding that the laws of physics always existed, or some other process created the laws of physics. It's still the same problem.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that I find interesting as you engage in this conversation, or you listen to skeptics and evolutionary scientists, theoretical physicists, they talk to try to disprove God and prove religious people as kind of ridiculous and non-scientific, because that's going to be what's thrown out at you, right?
Right.
You're not scientific. You're just crazy faith. We tend to ask the question, why are we here and what's purpose and meaning? They tend to say it doesn't matter.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. The reality is we are.
Right.
We are here. And why doesn't matter. Now, for the Christian worldview, why matters quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Okay. So when we talk about the cosmological argument, we talk about the fact that we are here. Why are we here? Was it accident, or was it purposeful and intentional? And the biblical worldview says purposeful and intentional.
That's right.
Okay. So if someone were to ask you, okay, then why did God create? How would you respond to that?
Why did God create in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you go back, again, from the biblical perspective, God first created man, Adam and Eve, right? All creation is a reflection of his glory. Okay? So it's not this idea that God was incomplete, that God was lonely. I think of it this way. Why does an artist create? It's who the artist is. It's what the artist does, right? It's just in him or her to make these beautiful paintings or whatever the method is. Sculptures. They just do it. It reflects the glory, the person in their artwork, right? So God creates us. Obviously, from our perspective, a Christian perspective, that creation falls into sin, depravity, and then God, on the heels of that, says, I'm going to redeem man and all of my creation. Now, somebody say, well, why would God even do? Well, okay, here's the thing. God can do what he wants with his creation, right? The sovereignty of God, the holiness of God, he does not have to answer to his creation as far as why he's doing this or why he's doing that. And I think
Shall
that's
the creator
important.
say to the creator, why have you made me
Right,
thus?
he doesn't,
Yeah.
and I think we lose that sometimes. If we're going to get into a conversation about, well, why did God create, or why I don't understand why God, well, hold on. If you're conceding that there is a God, that God does not owe you an explanation for anything. The artist can paint his painting the way he wants to.
Yeah.
And he can determine whether he is going to be in relationship with that painting or say, no, I don't want that painting. Mm-hmm. Well, sin separated us from God. And God said, but you know what? Because of my love, I'm going to make a way to be back in relationship with my creation without compromising my holiness. Messiah, Christ, salvation, right?
What I hear you saying is at the core of God's creation is his glory.
It's his glory.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So God...
It's not about us.
Yeah.
It's about him.
Yeah. So when we talk about why we are here, when we talk about the cosmological argument, from a Christian worldview, why is very important for the Christian, why is not necessarily important for the secular mind.
Right.
We are, and so if, and so here's the other thing, if we are here, why are people born with this innate sense of finding purpose and meaning in this life?
Yeah. Well, because they're made in the image of God.
Like, you have to do something with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right? If I'm just an accident, why does it matter what I do with my life? Ultimately,
it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Why do people talk in terms of wanting to leave the world a better place when they die than leaving their mark, leaving a legacy?
Yeah.
Why any of that if it doesn't ultimately matter?
Yeah, and I think what that actually shows inside the human heart is this longing to not stop existing. So have a library named after me, have a legacy, have whatever you may. But where's that coming from? You're nothing but a conglomerate of highly developed chemicals. Why does any of that matter?
Why do good?
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So so that's something that's coming out of our heart. And by the way, I would say that is something that is not tangibly observable under a microscope.
Yeah.
That's this other part of man, right? This spiritual part of man that is causing those longings. Now, from our perspective as a believer, God says, you have those longings because I put them in you, because I've created eternity in the hearts of man. Because as being the creator and you're my creation, you have that eternal spirit in you. That's why you're asking those questions, right? But again, we try to remove God out of there and explain it from a purely naturalistic framework. If you're going to stick with a naturalistic framework, purpose really, it doesn't matter what you do with your life. You die and move on, let the next species rule, period.
Yeah, natural selection, survival of the fittest.
But we're not good with that.
Well, and so on that note, what struck me going through the whole COVID-19 pandemic is if I'm a true secular humanist, believe in the theory of evolution, to me, this is exactly what should happen through the course of human and the development of the species.
Right.
The strong survive and move on.
Yep.
The weak die off.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, this goes back to Darwin, and so COVID is a Darwinian dream, right? It's the type of disease that will take out and remove the weakest and the sickest among us to produce a stronger, healthier, people moving forward. Yet you don't hear that. You hear,
no, not at all.
You hear from secular humanists,
Yeah.
we have to save lives.
Right.
We have to, protect, put on your mask and save, right?
Right.
Where's that? I don't think they realize that goes directly against what they actually believe.
Absolutely.
It's quite a contradiction.
Right.
So where is this care and this love or this concern for the weak?
Right.
and
Right.
the people with conditions that could be complicated by this virus and ultimately kill them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you so concerned about that?
Yeah.
I believe that you are. I don't.
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't believe. But I don't think they realize it's massively inconsistent with their worldview.
With their worldview, it is, because basically they would say to you, the reason we care about that is because it's the right thing to do. It's the good thing to do. Well,
Based on what?
Based on what? And again, I think it's important to understand. Sometimes I hear Christians say that atheists cannot have morality. That's not true at all. Atheists can have morality. Mm-hmm. But an atheist doesn't have an objective reason outside of himself for that morality. Mm-hmm. And I think that's huge to understand that. So basically, if there is no God and you say it's right to save people and save life, but there is no God, some transcendent authority outside of you and me, that's just your opinion. Mm-hmm. We ought to save life. Mm-hmm. That's just your opinion. I don't have to agree with that. See, well, Ron, you should. Well, no, what, based on what? Well, because I believe life is... Well, that's your opinion.
Yeah.
And if I'm a species or I'm an animal, you're an animal, who are you to invoke your morality on me? Yeah. See, you can't have this sense of it is 100% absolutely right to save life. You can't have that. Nope. And say that I can say that objectively. You can say it subjectively. That's what you think. Yeah. But you can't point the finger at me.
Well, and coincidentally, they become very consistent then when they talk in terms of abortion.
Absolutely. Now they are consistent, right?
Right.
Yep. You have the right to do what? Determine whether you're going to kill that baby or not.
Yeah. Based on what's right for
you. Right? So again, but if you apply that logic to just how we do life, okay, why does it matter how I treat you? Why does it matter if I want to take your life? Because my life will be better by taking your life.
If you take it to its full extent, absolutely.
If I'm homeless and you have a house, what if I murder you, get rid of your body, try to cover it up so I could have your house? Come on, why would you do that? It's so wrong. Based on what?
Which
based on our laws.
Coincidentally is what has happened during the major conquests of ancient history.
Absolutely.
You know,
right?
Whether it's the Danes invading England, the English countryside, and slaughtering villages, and then doing what?
Yep.
Taking their homes and their villages
and, saying,
and living.
Right? So again, this objective morality outside of ourselves, if it's purely naturalism and the supernatural does not come into play, it's your argument against mine.
Yeah. So within the cosmological argument, we have the fact that we exist. We have the fact that we have these values.
Yeah. Yeah.
That run contrary to secular humanistic worldviews.
Right.
And so you have to look at that and say, why do you care about good or saving lives or anything? Yep. There's something there that exists that's real, and you can't see it, but you can measure it in a sense.
And here's the thing about that. That's across all people across all ethnic groups.
Yep.
This idea sometimes is labeled this oughtness. Yep. There's this oughtness in us to move towards that. This is good, and I ought to do this. Yep. Now, some people may say, "Well, that's not true, Ron," because you look at some of the undeveloped nations or whatever. You see tribal people eating their neighbors and cannibalism. Well, no, they in their minds and hearts believe that it's okay to do that. There's still that sense of oughtness there, right? Yep. And so, how do you explain that if all of us are simply products of evolution, time and chance? Yeah. Where is that coming from?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting as you see a secular humanistic worldview beginning to grow and grow more in our country here in the U.S. Yeah. You can really see it starting to play out even in the streets of our major cities through the riots and things like that. Yeah. You see this class warfare. You have what I don't have. I want to, and I've been, you who have privilege have, subjected me to injustice, or my ancestors to injustice. And we're not going to get back into the whole injustice, but it is this, my truth now says that you must give up what you have so that now I can have. Right. But it's my truth.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so the whole socialistic kind of mindset is is you who have privilege need to give that up so that everybody else can have what they don't have or what you have.
Yeah, and yet if you think about that in terms of natural selection, in terms of the survival of the fittest, that doesn't follow.
Yeah, whether you agree with socialism or not, again, it's another one of those things that runs contrary to what your actual
worldview is. It runs contrary to a naturalism, holding naturalism as a worldview. It runs contrary to. If I can get ahead by stepping on you, so be it. At least I'm consistent with why certain species die out and other ones are because they were stronger, right? But then when it comes to these issues of justice and morality, all of a sudden we switch.
We do, yeah, they do.
To more of a theistic worldview without God.
Yep.
And that's where I say, but what's your basis for that?
Yeah.
Because it can't just be you and me, because you and I are just animals.
Yeah. So the moral argument says what?
The moral argument for God, or says that one of the evidences that there is a God is the fact that there is such a thing as objective morality that transcends ethnic groups.
Okay,
there is such a thing as a definite right, a definite wrong.
Yep, and that comes from somewhere.
That has to come from somewhere because it's outside of us.
Yeah,
it's outside of us.
So. Even the most relativistic atheist out there looks at a scene of a guy going into an elementary school shooting children and says there's something wrong there.
Right, absolutely.
Why?
Right.
Based on what? Who's told you that that's wrong?
Right.
Why do we recoil when we see crime and injustice, right? And murder and rape and children being trafficked, in the sex industry. Why do we look at that and say that that's wrong?
Absolutely.
There's something in us, hardwired in us, that looks at that and says that's wrong. There's also something very broken in human society that does allow those things to happen and participates in those things. And so we have to talk about evil in the world. We also have to talk about morality too. So in relation, though, going back to the moral argument, if you ask the average person on the street, is truth absolute or is it truth relative? Most people that you just meet on the streets most of them will say that truth is some form of relativity.
Right.
Meaning it's not objective, it's not absolute.
It's not absolute.
Right. Kind of the Oprah Winfrey idea of find your truth.
Right.
Okay, and they call this constructivism.
Yeah.
Where we construct in our own mind what is right and what is true based on our own experiences.
And how you feel.
And based on how you feel.
Post-truth.
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And so this is the culture. This is what you'll run into. You'll run into, whether they know it or not, you'll run into people who are constructionists. They have constructed this truth that for them is truth.
Yeah.
And then if you ask them, is that absolute?
Right. Right. See, the whole thing collapsed on
itself. I tell you, so if I ask you, do you believe in absolute truth? No, it's all relative. Is that absolute or is that relative?
Right. Is that answer that you just gave me?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that an absolute truth, what you just said?
Yeah.
And they're going to say, absolutely. You just contradicted yourself.
Yeah. And so you just keep going in this circle.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in absolute truth.
Right.
Now, why do you think people want to shy away from absolute truth? What do you think is going on there?
We want to be our own God.
That's right, yeah.
Bottom line. And see, this is the thing this is what, as I teach apologetics to the high schoolers, and I try to get them to see, you have to remove the trappings of religion.
Yes, I agree with that, yep.
Because there's a ton of baggage with religion, denominations, and we can point fingers all day.
So much blood has been shed.
Over
religious wars and things like that.
But look at the claims of there being a God, and then look at the reality of the world we live in, and then you have to say what best explains it. A transcendent God who says these things in Scripture, or evolution. And this is one of these things when it comes to us constructing our own truth or post-truth, like, okay, well, that's true, but for me, I feel this, so this is true for me. Where is that coming from? Well, from the biblical worldview, we can go all the way back to the garden, where Adam and Eve, they sin, they fall, but it's that temptation that Satan gave them. God knows in the day that you eat, you will be as God.
Yep.
Right? You have the authority, the right to govern yourself. And I think this is one of the ways you see it played out in our society now. This is truth, but no, for me, this is my truth.
Yep.
Now, here's the interesting thing about that. Even when people say that, and then they turn around and they look at you, and you say, okay, well, that's your truth. Okay, I'll grant that to you. Well, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. Oh, you're intolerant. You're a bigot. Whoa, wait, what just happened?
Yeah.
So I'm intolerant, but when you say what you believe, you're just true. When I say what I believe, I'm intolerant.
Yep.
You see the inconsistency there? So there's something going on at a deeper level.
Well,
here.
even when they say that truth is relative, but then they have a sense of absolute morality because just to make a statement, we want justice and you're intolerant, that indicates that the person saying those things has a sense of
that there is a right.
That there is a
rightness, right?
Yeah, that there is an absolute
There
right
is
and an absolute
right.
wrong.
Exactly.
Which tells you that then they actually at the end of the day do believe in absolute truth.
They do. They do. Yeah.
So in having these conversations with people, it's very actually easy to find and point out these consistencies.
Yeah.
And you can do it in a loving way. You don't have to.
Sure.
The point is isn't to make someone look stupid. It is to help them realize just how circular their reasoning is.
Yeah.
And how inconsistent they are with their own belief systems.
Yes.
And most of them haven't thought below the surface to really think about the fact that they're massively inconsistent with what their worldview is and what they say their worldview is. So if they say truth is relative and there's actually no absolute moral right or wrong, but then they say we need justice, you've immediately said, or you need to be tolerant, you've immediately said there's moral truth.
Right. Yep. You've established it in the very thing that you're...
And if they push back and say, well, that's just my moral truth, then someone else could push back and say, well, my moral truth is that I agree with Adolf Hitler.
Right.
Because you need to have, according to... And honestly, this is what led millions of people to follow Hitler, right?
Yeah.
We believe in his vision of one true, strong, kind of Aryan race.
Yep.
In order to do that, you got to get rid of these others. And in that, you can have this utopian peace in society, free of disease and bloodshed and all of these things, right? So for Hitler, that was true.
Yep.
And that was good, and that was right.
In his mind, that's right.
And yet history's judged him, as a murderer. And so, why? Why was Hitler's vision, and it was wrong, but why was it so wrong?
Right.
Because there is a God.
Yep.
That's why it was wrong.
That's it. No, and that's what I mean about having this objective morality. It has to be based in someone other than you and me.
Yep.
If it's just mano y mano, me versus it's one human against another, well, whoever has the bigger guns, they're going to make the rules and they're going to win.
Yep.
Right? But yet all of us have a sense that there is a rightness, an oughtness that ought to happen.
Yeah.
And again, that's universal. Ravi Zacharias recently passed, but he was talking about somebody that came up to the microphone and was questioning him and saying, you guys are trying to say Jesus is the only way and all of this, you Christians, you guys are so narrow-minded. It's all relative. It's all relative. Like, why do you insist that we must believe in your Christ? And Ravi Zacharias, in his just apologetic way that, lovingly said, I'll answer that. But I'll ask you a question first. Do you want me to give you an absolutely truthful answer or a relative answer?
That's perfect. Yeah.
It just collapsed on itself. You and I can't exist without objective morality. Yep. We just don't want to ascribe it to a God. Yep. Because then we're not just talking about social justice and things of that. Once I ascribe it to a God, now it's like, what does God say about my life and the way I'm living?
Yep.
And that part we don't want. We don't want that part.
Yeah, so the very idea of there being morality, of there being justice.
Yes.
And I agree, we want justice. But to simply state and cry for justice is to admit that there is a God who has ordered his world in such a way that there is right and there is
And there is wrong.
And when injustice is out there, we notice it, right?
Yep.
And we do something about it.
And
or
we
should,
react.
right?
Absolutely.
And again, not everyone in society will, but because of evil, and that's where we're going to head next week. We're going to just talk about the concept of evil and why is there evil, and did God create evil? Does God just allow evil? If there's such a holy God, how can we have such evil in the world? That's such a big question, and so we're going to take next week's podcast. We're going to discuss that next week. So we'll hold off on kind of delving into that today. But when we talk about the idea of morality, I don't think most people understand that if there is, the only reason, let me put it this way, the only reason there is any sense of morality among us is because there is a God.
That's it.
I don't know where you get morality if there is no God.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because you could live life in such a way, think about it, where you could better yourself.
Yeah.
If you're poor, if you're lacking something, just lie and cheat and steal and do what you got to do, man. You only go around once. Mm-hmm. Why keep any rules, right?
Yeah, and there are some that live that out.
Yeah, well, some do. That's how we have a prison system.
Right? So we'll talk about evil, but by and large.
But even the fact that they're in prison shows by large that our culture says what? No, there was a right way and there was a wrong way.
Yeah. And so the idea that we have prisons and a justice system and punishments for crimes tells you that we have this innate sense of morality in us. Right. And it goes beyond just, we have justice systems so that we can just have a peaceful culture.
Yeah.
All right. It goes beyond that to, no. I looked at that scene of that gunman who murdered those people, and I said that that's wrong.
Absolutely.
And everybody, every moralist or a relativistic atheist, on TV or the news says the same thing.
Yeah.
In fact, they sit in their, behind their desks or behind their computer screens and write and say how wicked this is and how horrible this is, yet at the very same time denying a holy God. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you can look at a scene and say that's wicked and say there is no God.
Right. And again, guys, here's why we're saying this. Because if you as a human being with an atheist view, there is no God, which means that you are 100% natural.
Yep. Right?
You are from chemicals. You are nothing but cells, chemical, DNA, right? So how does that conjure up a sense of morality? It's just material.
It just is.
It just is, right. Yeah. So where's the morality coming from?
Who has told us that killing that person is wrong?
Absolutely.
Yet it's in us. Who has told you that stealing that is wrong? So all of the 10 Commandments, just take those, right?
Yeah.
We believe that it came from a holy God who said, this is how I've ordered the world, this is how I've created things to operate. Right? And so we say that, it's easy. It comes from the Word and God who revealed himself and his will and his ways in the Word. And yet for the naturalist, if you're going to be consistent, you have to say, honestly, there is no right and there is no wrong.
Yeah.
So then you have to go down some road as well. We just have to do what's best for the community.
Yep.
Or the society we live in.
And I've heard that, right?
Yeah.
And here's my question. Doug, why should I care about the community I live in?
Yeah.
Well, Ron, because you want to propagate your species. Why? I don't care. I'm going to be dead and gone. The fact that my kids or my great-great-grandkids are making life better, why should I care? Yeah. I'm dead and gone. It doesn't benefit me at all. Well, that's pretty selfish. Oh, is that morally wrong? You can't get away from it.
The very statement that's right? Selfish is attributing to the fact that there's a morality that exists that comes from somewhere.
And I should not be selfish, right? And by the way, I know we're getting ready to end this too. When you hear people say science has disproven God, science has disproven God. Science cannot disprove God. You cannot apply the scientific method to the existence of God. Mm-hmm. Science cannot disprove God because God is something that is non-material.
Yep.
So a lot of times I hear people say, oh, everybody knows science has disproven God. They don't understand how science operates. Mm-hmm. You can't naturally, through naturalism, explain away or disprove the supernatural.
Yep.
The two are contrary.
Yep. So we exist, and as creatures that exist, we came from somewhere, And as creatures who came from somewhere, we also have this innate sense of right and wrong. We have a morality that exists in all aspects of our culture.
Right.
That had to come from
Somewhere.
somewhere. It doesn't just
Come from the chemicals.
yeah. And so in trying to explain or even trying to yourself understand what you believe and why you believe, these are really helpful arguments. This cosmological argument, this moral argument, it gives you a foundation to stand on. It says, yeah, you know what? That is right. Yeah, this did have to come from somewhere. And maybe I don't understand it all. Maybe I can't articulate it all. And maybe, but you know what? At the end of the day, there is a right and a wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if God hasn't existed and told us what is right and wrong, then there is no right and wrong.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
So, but all you have to do is look at society and say, no, there is right and wrong. To argue that there isn't a right and wrong is, to me, just being intellectually dishonest.
Right.
So, hope that that's been a help for you, just in giving you a foundation for just the existence of God. What you're going to run into, kind of as we close today's podcast, and you need to be prepared for this. The vast majority of people in the world are not atheists.
Right.
The vast majority, and the atheists, I don't know what the percentage is now. I know it's a growing number, but it's still a very small minority of people in the world. Most people believe in something. Yet they have a designation in society called the nuns, those that mark themselves as, what religion are you? Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, Mormon, or none. And a lot of people will mark none. That category of none, no religion, is actually a big category, specifically in the United States and probably Europe as well. But what they don't mean necessarily by saying I don't have a religion is that they're atheistic.
Right.
A lot of them will say, no, I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual
person. Yes.
You get a lot of that in our culture. So we don't have this carte blanche, it feels like atheism is very strong out there. That's only because the voices of the atheists are very loud.
Depends who gets the microphone.
Yeah. So they're writing books, they're doing podcasts, they're going to college campuses, they're doing debates. And so it seems like atheism is such a massive movement, and it really isn't. I mean, it is growing and getting some headway, but it's not as massive as it feels at times. Most people that don't attribute themselves as religious will say, I'm a spiritual person. Now, ultimately, that spirituality comes from within themselves.
Right.
It's very experiential. It has all to do with themselves. And so when we talk to people, we can't just assume that because they're not religious that they're an atheist, or a hardened atheist.
Right.
And so talking to people that consider themselves spiritual will go down the road of, that's my truth. So I think it's helpful when you talk about people that talk about my truth and this works for me and this works, and I found this is so helpful for me. This is what I always tell them. I'm not a Christian because it's helpful. In fact, if you look at the lives of the early Christians, Christianity was less than helpful.
Right.
In fact,
martyrdom.
It created a lot of issues in their lives. And yet, so they weren't Christians because they found it helpful or therapeutic or because it even made sense. They were Christians because they believed in the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, it was true.
They believed it because it was
on
true.
Truth.
And if Jesus can rise from the dead, and that guarantees my resurrection, then death has no power over me. And so I'm a Christian not because it works or because it's helpful. I'm a Christian because it's true.
Right.
And if more and more Christians can understand that, I think they're going to be able to stand in the face of adversity a little bit better.
Yeah.
That I don't believe this because it feels good or because it's therapeutic or it made sense even, or because it's helpful. Most people follow religions because they find it helpful for them in some avenue of their life.
Right.
Not the Christian. You're a Christian, hopefully I'm a Christian because it's true.
Right.
And these are some of the arguments and some of the ways that we can kind of prove that it is true.
And if Christianity were not true, I would not want to be a Christian.
No. So in ending, I will also add to this. I don't believe in Christianity simply because of the cosmological or moral argument.
Right.
Okay, so that's when we have to talk about, I'm actually a Christian because I believe in a sovereign God who called me and chose me before the foundation of the world.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about some very spiritual realities
Yeah.
that the Bible teaches. And so at some point we can get into a discussion of soteriology and what does God do? What happens when someone becomes a true follower of Jesus? And now that can happen through an intellectual kind of journey, kind of like C.S. Lewis type of journey. That can happen through God just using a simple gospel presentation to provoke someone to faith and repentance. But what the Bible clearly teaches is I'm not a Christian because of the moral argument or these other arguments or the cosmological argument. I'm a Christian because God did something supernatural in my life and gave me this faith to believe.
Yeah.
The scriptures state clearly that faith is Ephesians 2 is a gift of God. So the faith to believe is this gift that God gives. So any one of us who is a Christian today are not Christians because we drummed up this faith.
Right.
Because of all these arguments. We're a Christian because God saw in his grace to choose us to be his followers and to save us and to give us this faith to believe.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to wrap it up by kind of coming full circle when we asked what is at the core of God's creation. And we talked about it being the glory that he wants to display, a reflection of him. So the Apostle Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 2, God being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our sin, made us alive together with Christ. And again, I reference this. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Now here's why did he do this? Why did he create? Why did he love us? Why did he save us? Why did he seat us with him in the heavenly places? Why? So that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. And there you have, God saved you, God called you so that he could show his grace and his mercy and his love, which points to his glory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on that note, we'll end it today. And next week we'll talk about the issue of evil in the world and why it exists and why God allows it and how he's going to deal with it in the end. So thank you once again for joining us on Black and White Theology.
All right.
Tune in next time, and this time seems to be working for you.
Yeah.
5:30-ish on Wednesday nights. And so, by the way, if Ron is coming dressed a little nicer than me, there is a reason for that.
There's multiple reasons for that, but we're out of time. I won't go through all of them.
Yeah, but Ron is an academic professor, okay, and
You're a soccer coach.
I'm a middle school soccer coach, so John and I coach middle school soccer together, and then we come out right from there pretty much to podcast.
Yeah. And I'm coming right from the ivory halls of intellectual learning.
That's right.
So it's good. You
right.
You got the physical and you got the intellectual. That's good.
We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that.
Go ahead and like our Facebook page, Faith Church of Sellersville, YouTube page, Faith Church of Sellersville. Like and share the videos, and we'll keep coming at you with help for everyday life.
All right. Cue the music, John.
Until next week, we'll see you guys.